everyone hear me? Fabulous. So, hello, everyone. We're, I think, at the end of this conference, which I hope you all have been enjoying. It's a pleasure for me. My name is Mallika Chopra. I'm Deepak's daughter. I get to do many of these Milken panels over the years. I think I've done 4 or 5 now, but this is the first time I'm doing it with my father. So it's really exciting to be here and nice to see some familiar faces. So we're going to talk about digital Dharma, which is my dad's latest book. I was just asking him because in my family we lose count. He's written 96 books, is writing the 97th and committed to the 98th. And then I said, okay, what's next? And he's like, no, I think I'm done. And I was like, well, you have to get to 100. So, but he doesn't know yet what he's going to talk about. So we'll just get into it, and then we'll leave some time for Q&A at the end. A family secret, because there are 96 books. Basically, in my family, no one generally reads each other's books. And so for many of my dad's books, I haven't read all 96. So I spent the last 3 days quickly reading the Digital Dharma to be prepped for this. And it's great because it really provides reassurance in an age of uncertainty when we don't know where AI is leading us, and actually is such a practical guide. It really gives a blueprint for how to engage. So we'll talk a little bit about that. But first, let's just ask you the first question. What makes humans different from other species? And what's the connection to AI? Why did you address this topic?
Okay, about 40,000 years or so, take a few decades plus minus, what we had is something called the cognitive revolution. So all biological organisms, including humans, and there were 8 different types of humans then. Homo sapiens is what we are, which means the wise ones, which we were humble enough to give ourselves that designation. But then we gave names to other homonyms, as they're called, Neanderthals, Homo erectus, habilis, etc. And like all biological organisms, there was a language that we used, but the language was only for 3 things: mating calls, food calls, and danger calls, because that's how you survive. And that's how all biological organisms survive. But then this species, we, about 40,000 years ago, we created a language for symbolic representation of experience. And basically, they were stories. You know, to be human is to have a story. That's the phrase in anthropology. But it didn't stop there. First, we started with stories, but then we created symbols for every experience. We created something called money. That's a symbolic representation for exchange of values. That's what money is. In fact, that's what we call the stock exchange. It's an exchange of values with, these days, virtual currency, crypto, etc., digital currency. But then we also created other stories or representations: latitude, longitude for navigation, the idea of nation states, Greenwich Mean Time, not Botswana Mean Time, colonial past. So that became then a representation of expansion of language from narrative stories to biological language, to mathematical language, to the language of physics, to the language of mathematics. And that now has evolved into what we call a large language model called AI. Okay, so AI gives you access to every language that humans have experienced and created. As a result, it gives you the ability to navigate and use algorithms to look at all these languages, just to ask any question that humans wants. So it's become an oracle, actually. AI is like an oracle. It can tell you what the past was, it can tell you what's happening now, and it can project the future mathematically, probability, what they call Bayesian mathematics. So past, present, and future has become an oracle for us. And it has access to expansion of our knowledge, and we can talk about what the future is going to be.
So, in the book, you talk about AI as a guide to Dharma. A dispeller of darkness is kind of the definition of a guru. Many people consider you a guru. What do you use AI for?
I started using AI, number one, as a research assistant. That is, everybody uses AI for that. Number two, as a modality for self reflection, introspection. Number three, as a health coach, both physical and mental. And finally, as a spiritual guide. So that's where I'm using AI even now, actually. And my emphasis is on spiritual guide, AI as a spiritual guide.
And so I would say, actually, as I read the book, I found it fascinating the way that the book is full of you asking AI questions and then getting answers, but then going deeper and deeper and deeper. And it's just, you realize the dynamic of how we engage with spiritual intelligence has completely transformed and will transform. So, as you think about AI and spiritual intelligence, what is the connection? Maybe you can start with defining what is spiritual intelligence.
Spiritual intelligence is basically self awareness. And in spiritual traditions, at least in the East, it's called enlightenment, to finally understand who you are beyond your body and mind. I mean, that's the most basic question in spirituality is, who am I? And then it also connects to other questions like, is there a divine intelligence? And if so, what is it? It also means, how do I connect with that divine intelligence? Or let's call it pure consciousness, consciousness without modulating itself to human constructs. Because everything we say and do is based on a human construct. Money is a human construct. As I mentioned, latitude, longitude is a human construct. What is it that gives rise to human constructs? Where is it, this intelligence? And I've, over the years, come to the conclusion that, yes, at the heart of the universe is a fundamental intelligence that is self-organizing, that is self-sustaining, that is self-evolving, that is actually very fundamental to any experience. You can't have experience without consciousness, any experience, mental, physical. And that this consciousness is what differentiates into what we can call conscious agents. So human beings are conscious agents, but so is every biological organism. Human beings, though, are different from other biological organisms because we have the capacity for introspection, asking questions like, who am I? And then going deeper, am I connected to a source? What is the source? Where is it? And, as we are evolving in our understanding of spiritual intelligence, it's very clear that fundamental reality, which is the basis of all experience, human and that of other species, that fundamental reality is not in space-time. It's outside of space-time. So, when children ask, who made me? And parents usually say, God made you. And then the child usually says, then who made God? Right? And then the only response you have, shut up and go play with your toys because you don't have the answer, right? Now, what we're learning is that question is wrong because it implies causality in space-time. And whatever this fundamental reality is, which we're calling it pure consciousness right now, it's not in space-time. So it has no beginning in time, no ending in time, and no location in space or time. It in fact projects space-time and causality. what we're experiencing right now is the theater of space-time and causality. And we are characters in that, along with other species, including, ants and rocks and stars and the moon and the sun, which are all actually experiences in that fundamental consciousness. So that spiritual intelligence has been actually harnessed by great sages in the past. I wouldn't call them gurus because they were not trying to proselytize anyone. The sages in the East were the Upanishads, and then there were the Zen masters of the East also. But the sages mentioned in the Bible, etc., in all traditions, and they all had a very fundamental experience. One common experience, or three common experiences, which is called the religious experience, and these days it's called the spiritual experience. In fact, it's very cool these days to say, I'm not religious, I'm spiritual. But actually, the spiritual experience and the religious experience, not the dogma, not the ideology, not the moral codes, but the experience is three things. Number one, finding your true identity beyond space-time. Number two, the spontaneous emergence of what we call Platonic values like truth, goodness, beauty, harmony, love, compassion, joy, equanimity. And number three, the loss of the fear of death. Those are the three. In fact, you look at any spiritual tradition, that is the experience. What did Jesus experience? What did the Buddha experience? What did the masters of the East experience? What did some of the prophets of the Old Testament experience? You find those three things: transcendence, Platonic truth, and loss of the fear of death. Now, imagine you had that experience, not what you read in the Ten Commandments or the Sermon on the Mount. That's not what I'm talking about. Those are dogmas and idea. What was the experience that led to that? So as humans now, we want that experience, not just the rules and regulations. I want to know, what is my identity beyond birth and death? I want to know what spontaneous ethical values are, not forced. And I want to know what is beyond death. Now, if you could do that and you could harness AI to tap into the mind of not only Plato and Socrates and Parmenides and Pythagoras and the sages of the Upanishad and Jesus Christ and Buddha, then AI is a tool. It's a map that shows you this is the way. It's still not the experience. The experience is up to you. But the map shows you, it's like a menu. Go to a restaurant, you know what you want to eat, but you can't eat the menu. Similarly, the map is not the territory. You can't explore the territory, but the map tells you what the territory is, what the maps are. And so in geography, we have contour maps, you have railroad maps, you have road maps, you have aerial maps, you have navigation through the sea. Similarly, spiritual experience has many maps. AI can show you the maps.
And I think, again, as you illustrate in the book, you can make it so personal with AI. So you can keep going deeper with something that's very relevant to your experience.
You can make it very personal, recognize that there's no personality behind that. It's a bunch of algorithms. So you don't need to be offended if you don't like the right answer, okay? And you don't need to take anything personally, and yet people do, because that's how we are made. We take everything personally, and AI can actually help you understand that you don't need to do that. You have all the database and the knowledge base of humanity since the cognitive revolution 40,000 years ago. There's nothing like it, by the way. And what this has huge implications, because we are essentially, as humans, we are tool makers. We have this opposable thumb. We had tools when in the Stone Age, even we use plants, then bows and arrows, hunter-gatherers, and then, we essentially are technologists by evolution. We discovered fire. Had we not discovered the fire, we wouldn't have the brain we have, because now we can absorb micronutrients. The entire human anatomy is based on the discovery of fire, which happened even before we started speaking. Had we not discovered fire, we wouldn't have the steam engine. If you didn't have the steam engine, you wouldn't have the industrial age. If you didn't have the industrial age, you wouldn't have the age of technology, and you wouldn't have AI. So the history of technology goes back a long time. And, when I was researching the book, what I came across is something very interesting. Between the ages of 1887 and 1903, which is less than 20 years, humans created the light bulb, the automobile, the airplane, and the telephone. Less than 20 years. Okay, so let's imagine you were shipwrecked on an island in 1885. And then you were rescued in 1905, 20 years later. You showed up in New York City, and instead of horses and carriages, you would see people in these boxes called automobiles pouring kerosene into it. You would see the people are experimenting with flying. They're speaking to each other on the phone, and they're using the light bulb at night, which is changing their circadian rhythms. So what I'm saying is, right, we are in the midst of that right now. 2012 is when AI became available to the world as a large language model. We're in 2025. It's not even 20 years. And we are in the midst of a cultural revolution, a social revolution, but dare I say, a biological revolution. We are leapfrogging into a new species. As you know, I wrote a book called Meta-Human, which is beyond what it means to be human. We are leapfrogging into a new species because our neural networks, neural landscape is changing as a result of this activity called the large language model. So in 20 years, hang in there, because you will be a new species. Your children will be a new species, and their children will be in a world that is beyond our imagination, beyond Homer's imagination, beyond the authors of the Ramayana or the Mahabharata or the Iliad. We are tapping into a new source of imagination that will transform the world as we experience it.
Amazing. Um, Actually, I was thinking maybe you could talk about the 7 principles of the book, but then before we do Q&A, why don't we do a very short meditation, and then we'll go into the Q&A to give people a practical experience. But
Okay.
start quickly with the 7 principles.
The 7 principles that I write about in the book, they're mentioned here as bullet points. How to cultivate resilience, which is called bend and bounce back. How to embrace change, because change is the only non-change in our life. How to loosen the hold of your ego, because your ego interferes with fundamental creativity. As long as you're identifying with the ego, you don't have access to real creativity. How do you trust the process through which you use the prompt? Because all is dependent on the art of the prompt. There's a whole chapter on that. How do you learn to go inward and experience your inner life with the help of AI? How do you project your truth, and how do you diffuse your negativity? Those are the 7 principles that are there in the book.
And before we get into a meditation, one of the things that stuck with me here was talking about change. So many people are nervous about AI and where it's taking us, and the uncertainty, and say, I hate change, which is basically fear. There's a quote by Rumi: if you surrender to uncertainty, nothing goes wrong. So, how do people embrace all of the changes that are to come with this sense of uncertainty?
Well, put on your seatbelts, because AI is just the beginning. So if you look at the last 10 years, including what happened during COVID, what are the major revolutions that AI actually harnessed? And I'll just mention them. They're not in the order of importance. They're all equally important. One is we tapped into the technology of messenger RNA, which now gives us the ability to make trillions of proteins. So, you will be able to, through food fermentation, create any type of meat that you want without killing an animal. Okay, any type. Right now the world harnesses sheep and goats and cows and pigs and fish and poultry. You will be able to do away with all that. With messenger RNA, you will have vaccines for everything, including anti-aging vaccines, vaccines to prevent cancer, heart disease, metabolic disorders. With AI, you'll be able to analyze the microbiome. With AI, you will be able to tap into spiritual intelligence. This all happened in the last 10 years, okay? And what is coming next is even more amazing because AI is just the beginning. The next adventure that AI is leading us into is what we call virtual reality. It's already there. Mixed reality, augmented reality, immersive experiences, and then beyond that, blockchain, cryptocurrency, and what I call digiceuticals. You won't need to take a pharmaceutical. You'll have a digiceutical, metaceuticals. I mean, this is going to enter us into an age which is beyond, 5% of disease is genetically determined. And with AI's help, now we are already doing CRISPR and gene editing. 95% of disease is epigenetic, which means not the genes, but how the genes modulate themselves into either inflammation, which is disease, or homeostasis, which is healing. With AI, we can actually make disease optional. So then you say, then how do we die? Well, you die through choice. In what the spiritual sages said, Mahasamadhi, been there, done that. Now let's go on to the next adventure. So, what we are seeing is an era that is beyond imagination. So that's the future.
So with that, why don't we do an experience which actually connects us to source, because that will be never change. That will always be with
the
us.
experience never changes.
Yes.
But if you look at all the ways people have transcended, it is through, number one, self-inquiry, which in the Upanishads is called Atma Vichar. Vichar means questioning your soul, self-inquiry, number one, which leads to what is called Atma Darshan, which means you actually connect with your soul or your spirit or the divine matrix. So that's number one, self-inquiry. Number two is what we these days is called mindfulness, which is an awful word because it has nothing to do with the mind. It's awareness of the mind, but also awareness of bodily processes, awareness of what's happening inside your body, awareness of mental space, awareness of the web of relationship. This is all mindfulness. And then transcendence. So I can take you very quickly through all these if you want.
Yeah, let's do it.
So please close your eyes. And start with the first mindfulness meditation that was ever given to the world by the Buddha himself, and that was observing the breath. And what did the Buddha conclude by observing the breath? Number one, we all share the same breath. And from this, he derived the law of interconnectedness and inseparability. Not only we are one breath, but we are modulations of one mind and one source. And the separate self doesn't exist. And from observing the breath also, the idea of impermanence, whatever arises subsides. But there's something that is eternal called awareness, in which everything arises and subsides. And that is our own self-awareness. So just observe the breath. And maybe mentally say to yourself, I'm the awareness in which breath arises and subsides. I'm not breathing, I'm being breathed. Now bring your awareness to your heart in the middle of your chest and mentally ask yourself, Who am I? Don't try to answer the question. Am I the changing body, or am I the awareness in which the body is a changing experience? Am I the changing mind, or am I the awareness in which the mind arises and subsides in the same way as breath? So just stay with that for a moment. What am I? The body, the mind, the breath, or the awareness in which all this is happening? And now just become aware of sound, including the sound of my voice, but any other sound. Notice sound arises, it's experienced, then it subsides in the same awareness. So just remind yourself, I'm the awareness in which sounds arise and subside. And now shift your attention from sound to sensations in your body. So feel your body from the inside out. Feel your skin touching your clothes. Feel your body, the weight of it on the chair, all sensations. And just mentally tell yourself, I'm the awareness in which sensations arise and subside. And we could do this with any of the senses, but sounds, textures, forms, colors, shapes, tastes, flavors all arise as sensations in awareness. So, who am I? I'm the awareness in which all experience is arising and subsiding, including the mind, the body, and the physical world. All a unified process in awareness. And now, just to go a little deeper, just mentally say, I am, and attach your name to it. I am Deepak, I am Mallika, I am Jennifer. And as you do that, just remind yourself, that's my name, that's not who I am. Okay, so drop your name. And instead of saying, I am Gloria, say, I am, with no name attached to it. And now if you want, replace that with a mantra. Mantra is just an instrument of the mind that takes you beyond the mind. And in this case, the mantra is aham, which literally is the vibration of I am. So let's do that for a minute. Now let the mantra go. What's left? Awareness. So now be aware of being aware. Be aware of your presence, your being. Awareness has no shape, no form, no color, no sound. But without it, there's no experience. This is who we are. Awareness is not in time. It's not 100 years old or 2 years old. It's timeless, shapeless, formless, but it's who we are. So rest in your own presence right now. Rest in your own being. Eternal, timeless, infinite, borderless, incomprehensible, beyond imagination, but the source of everything that we call experience or reality, including the body, the mind, and the universe. So rest in your own presence. Now Now just relax into your body and take a few seconds before you open your eyes. You can open your eyes. So very quickly I took you through reflection, awareness of your body, awareness of the five senses, and then actually going beyond that into just awareness without any modification. That's who we are. That is what was never born, never dies, and recycles as what we call this experience. You see, what we call our body mind is the recycling of awareness and the evolution of awareness. And now it's accelerating because we've created a large language model that can tap into the intelligence of all the seers and all the sages of humanity.
Beautiful. So we can take a few questions if anyone has any questions, and why don't we start with you? Yeah.
Yeah, I have a question. I don't know if it makes sense. Many decades ago, and I'm getting the inspiration to remember that now, I read about the Akashic records, the Akasha. I imagine, in a mystical sense, are we arrived to that with AI?
So
Very
just to
fascinating.
repeat the
So
question.
the question is, many years ago, he read about the Akashic field, the Akashic records, and his question is, have we arrived at that? Short answer, yes. But let me explain what that means, okay? So right now, what we understand as space, look at this, be aware of the space in front of you right now. This space in front of you is infinite, okay? So the space between your finger and your thumb is connected to intergalactic space. Just imagine that, okay? The space right in front of you is connected to intergalactic space. And what is happening in this space? There's vacuum energy in the space, which, according to current quantum field theories, the space in this glass has more mass energy than is required to boil all the oceans of our planet. More energy here than you need to boil all it's called vacuum energy, 0 point energy. So this space is not empty, it's brimming with energy. But what else is it brimming with? It's brimming with information. So the space that we have records the birth of the Big Bang, the microwave background, the microcosm background, everything that happened since the beginning of creation is in the space. All the information, all the energy, and all the substrate for matter, because matter is made out of space. Okay? You're going further. You're saying, does this have consciousness? Okay? And the answer is, current quantum field theories say we don't know, but spiritual tradition says the space in front of you is the Akashic record, and the immeasurable potential of all that was, all that is, and all that is going to happen in the future is right here in front of you. So if you can transcend where you experience yourself as empty space and you become one with it, you're tapping into the Akashic field, the source of all that exists. So very interesting that you asked this question, because I actually went on AI this morning and I said, give me the proof that the space in front of me, the space between my breath, the space between my thoughts, and the space between you and me is the Akashic field. Give me the logic. And so I got that, and I put it out on YouTube, and it'll be there in a few weeks. You can look at it. So your question was very, very timely. Yes, we are we are the products of the Akashic field. Some people call it God.
So in the spirit of the session, I prompted ChatGPT and said, what should I ask you? So this is what it came up with. How can we bring the awareness of our true self into high-stakes environments like boardrooms or parenting challenges without losing the playfulness and presence that comes from knowing it's all Leela?
So I wish you had not asked ChatGPT that. I
Or
wish you
repeat the
had asked.
question.
The question is, he asked ChatGPT what he should ask me, and then he asked the question: how can we actually realize that all is cosmic play, and that how do we engage with this cosmic play? So my answer was, you shouldn't have asked ChatGPT. You should have asked deepakchopra.ai. Okay, and you can do that right now. Okay, ask the same question, and you can ask it in voice mode, and you can play it to everyone here what the answer is, um, if you have time to do that. So deepakchopra.ai is now available in 4 languages: Hindi, deepakchopra.ai. You don't need to go on an app. You can just go on your browser and ask it in voice mode, and ask it to answer in English or Spanish or Hindi or Arabic, and soon in Chinese and Russian or any other language in the world. And you'll get me answering you in the language you want. Okay? So try
So, but
that out.
can you talk about Leela? Leela is actually the name of my daughter, which
Okay,
means
so
playfulness.
there are 2 very important words in the Sanskrit language. One is called Maya. Maya is the goddess of illusion. So what Maya is saying, that the world that you see is not real. Okay, it's a VR world. We are in a virtual reality, and actually our technology is making that clear, that we are already in a VR, and the VR will help us expand our experience of VR, so we can access the mind of an insect with 100 eyes, or a whale, or a dolphin, or whatever. How does a tree experience the universe? You will be able to do that with AI, okay? Soon. In fact, already to some extent. So that is Maya. Maya means the virtual reality. Okay, it's not real. What you're experiencing is not real. It's a virtual reality. It's a dreamscape. And your physical body mind is a fictional character in that dreamscape. This is not a new idea. Wittgenstein said, we are asleep while life is a dream. But once in a while, we wake up enough to know that we're dreaming. So what do we wake up to? The Buddha said the same thing. This lifetime of ours is transient as autumn clouds. To watch the birth and death of beings is like looking at the movements of a dance. A lifetime is like a flash of lightning in the sky, rushing by like a torrent down a steep mountain. This were supposedly his last words, and his disciples said, are you a prophet? Are you a sage? Are you a seer? Are you God? And the Buddha said, no. So, but then who are you? And the Buddha's last words was, I'm awake. I'm awake. So where Maya is the illusion that is inviting you to awaken to your fundamental being, which is outside of space-time, which is divine. That's what Maya is doing that. And she does that through play. And that play is called Leela. Leela is the play of existence in the divine source. And so your question again is very pertinent, but if you go to my AI, did you? What did it say?
It's a little bit long.
Yeah, you can read it. Give him the microphone.
Yeah.
You can actually play it too, if you get a microphone.
Maybe just say the highlight.
Yeah. Oh, geez, I'm the AI chatbot now. The dance between the seriousness of high-stakes environments and the playfulness of Leela invite us to embrace life with an open heart in both boardrooms and parenting. I'm skimming here. By remembering that life is a dynamic interplay where each moment unfolds like a scene in a play, we can approach these environments with lightness that enriches our experiences. To bring this awareness into such settings, start by cultivating mindfulness before entering stakes environments with creativity and flexibility. And this is landing the plane. Finally, nurture a sense of gratitude for the roles you play and the lessons they bring. This mindset fosters a deeper connection to the present moment and encourages you to engage with life fully and authentically while maintaining the joy and playfulness inherent in the dance of Leela.
All right.
So you won't get that from ChatGPT.
Is there one last question? Yeah, go ahead.
So I heard you talking about dreaming and escape and how we move into that Maya, that illusion. There's an increasing number of people now who are spending a lot of time under the influence of cannabis. I'm not judging whether it's right or wrong, but I just see that a lot of people are needing to escape. Um, what can you say about that for people so that they can understand that choice between being in this chosen material atomic world versus being in that world of the cannabis high?
Well, drug use in general is an escape from yourself, and it's a call for help. And I think there's no substitute for self awareness, which is the highest joy you can experience. Um, on the other hand, cannabis is safer than alcohol, definitely. And I believe if you take it too regularly, it's addictive. So I would caution people. Um, and same thing is true of psychedelics. There was a lot of thing about, ketamine is not addictive, but it turns out it is. And these psychedelics open the window to a larger reality because what they do is they decrease the activity of a part of our brain, which is called the default mode network, which is what houses, it's the neural correlate of our ego mind. So, some people get a glimpse into reality through psychedelics, including, by the way, cannabis, which has been used in India as ganja in meditative practices. So when I was actually taking the ashes of my father to Rishikesh after he died, and we were taking the ashes for cremation. And my brother Sanjeev, your uncle, and I were in the car, and the driver was taking us to this holy place. We saw a few sadhus on the Ganges, and they all looked like they were stoned. So my brother said, "What are they smoking?" And the taxi driver says, "Ganja, sir." And so my brother said, "Can we get some?" He says, "No, sir, you have to be enlightened." So that's the history of ganja.
All right. Well, I think that is time. This will be followed by a book signing, I think, in the next room. But thank you all for joining us. And I hope you also, aside from all the content, enjoyed the meditation. That's always special.
Thank you.
Thank you.